Good morning. Welcome, everybody. Special welcome to people who are here for the first time or relatively new. Special welcome. And particularly for those people to make sure you know what you're in for, so to speak. The full disclosure is we'll be sitting for about 50 minutes with a little break in the middle. The official time to readjust, but please feel free to readjust your posture as needed at other times so you feel comfortable and welcome to be here. My name is Bill Spangle, Zopa Heron, and Dora DeCourcy. We welcome Zopa back. She's been on retreat for a month. So glad to have her home. One of the intriguing stories of the Buddha and the Buddhist teachings is the story of the transmission from the Buddha to the disciple Mahakashyapa, where it is said that the Buddha simply held up a flower. I have a leaf from the Bodhi tree as a handy prop here, but maybe that will work. And that was all that was necessary for the transmission. I think if I were to try it, we would find out it had something to do with who was holding the flower. But apart from that, we could also say that amongst all the disciples, that Mahakashyapa was the only one who got it, that particular style. And I think most of us need a little bit more help than that. We might sit down in front of the Buddha and the Buddha goes, and we'd go, and? And so the rest of the Dharma is what comes after and. It's the response to that. It's the response that allows us to see more clearly how things are and to adjust our approach to life and our approach to what arises in our mind so that it's more skillful, so that it leads away from confusion, leads towards well-being. And I kind of backed into this introduction thinking about how it is that we begin our practice with the brief reminder of refuge and bodhicitta, the reminder to turn our minds to the Dharma, turn our minds to what is deeply reliable, most profoundly reliable, and to turn our minds to open our hearts and turn our minds towards holding the welfare of all beings in our minds. And one of the traditional supports for the latter is to hold clearly in our minds a sense of the presence of all beings of the past, present, and future. And holding in our minds a sense of connectedness. And for this, we can use our imagination to actually see the faces of those close to us, see the faces, if we know them, of our ancestors, see the faces of just random memories of people that we've met in passing. thinking also about all other kinds of sentient beings, all animals, and because we're actively imagining this, we think, oh, this is my imagination right at the moment. But what we're being encouraged to do is actually open to the circumstance that is actually the way things are. We're being encouraged to remind ourselves that we do, in fact, exist in this web of profound interconnectedness. And so when we begin our practice of calm abiding, which is our main practice for the morning, we begin with this reminder, with an active sense of our connection to all beings. And if we look closely at this, we can see that if we look at beings not just at one moment in their lives, but think about the dynamics of our lives. Think about the dynamics of birth and growing old, dying, all the ups and downs in between. If we think about that play is constantly unfolding. It's unfolding in our own being right at the moment. If we think about this and really bring it to the forefront in our minds, the deeper we think about it, the more we can develop a sense of tenderness and open-heartedness about this amazing play, this play of activity, this play of well-being and suffering, this constant churning. Our usual habit is to think only of our own domain of feelings and aspirations, if not only, at least primarily. If we look closely, we'll see rather easily that we actually wish to experience well-being. We wish to experience freedom from confusion and anxiety, freedom from a sense of being driven, and it doesn't take much if we think about all other beings in all the cycles of activity, birth and living and death, that throughout all this, that all wish for the same deep well-being. The example of the Buddha and the example of all the masters of various traditions who have worked deeply. The example of all of these beings is that it's actually possible to find this profound well-being. And so we go for refuge in this example, understanding that it's also possible not just for them because they're special, but it's possible for all beings. And so when we begin our practice with this sense of connectedness, in the midst of this field of connectedness, we allow our minds to come to rest so that we have an opportunity to discover something about the potential of our own minds, to be free from the churning. We can discover this moment by moment. And at first, the moments seem insignificant in relationship to the general habit of being lost in chasing after thoughts and feelings and memories. But over time, these moments accumulate, and we can have a deeper confidence. Within this practice of calm abiding, where if we begin in a very simple way to just find one aspect of our experience and settle our minds there, like the flow of the breath coming and going, it may seem like we have, of necessity, cut ourselves off from other beings. But it's not the case. It's not the case any more than it was the case when we were just going about our business, not particularly thinking about other beings in our ordinary life. Yet the connection was there in a profound, ongoing way. In the same way, we can begin our practice by bringing to the forefront our sense of connectedness. And then within this space of connectedness, we find our own peace. We find our own potential in the simple act of allowing the mind to settle for a moment. So we can begin with the prayer of refuge and bodhicitta.
Until the summit of enlightenment is reached, I and all beings go for refuge to the sources of true refuge. I will now practice the absorption of calm abiding in order to release all beings from their particular suffering and establish them in lasting peace and happiness. Until the summit of enlightenment is reached, I and all beings go for refuge to the sources of true refuge. I will now practice the absorption of calm abiding in order to release all beings from their particular suffering and establish them in lasting peace and happiness. Until the summit of enlightenment is reached, I and all beings go for refuge to the sources of true refuge. I will now practice the absorption of calm abiding in order to release all beings from their particular suffering and establish them in lasting peace and happiness.
In the midst of this field of infinite connections, connections to those that we know well, connections to those that we hardly know or do not feel like we know at all. In the midst of this, in order to be a profound benefit, we allow our own minds to come to rest. We allow our own minds to discover moments of freedom from the habitual patterns and churning of the mind. Simply allowing the mind, the awareness to settle on the flow of experience of the breath. There's no need to push away other experiences that arise in the mind. No need to have a sense of aggression towards them. We simply vividly find the experience of the breath coming and going. After placing the awareness in this way, we simply relax into the experience itself, the sensations of the breath coming and going. since the habit to be caught up in thought and memory and become lost is very strong. We will, from time to time, wake up and see that we are lost. In that case, we simply begin again fresh. Particularly if we're new to the practice, or even if we are long-time practitioners and our practice has become a little stale, it can be helpful to do this cycle intentionally in short sessions within each session. So we bring the attention vividly to the breath. Relax into it. Before the habit of wandering takes over, before we become exhausted, we just let go of the effort for a moment. Continue like that. Stretch if you need. And as you return to the practice, just for a flash, remind yourself of your connectedness to all beings. And in the midst of that, return.
By this virtue may I quickly realize Mahamudra and establish all beings without exception in this state.
Thank you all. We begin and end with all beings because we're always with all beings. So this morning we're actually pausing just a few minutes early because we have an interesting announcement, and it's yes. But while we're waiting for Lama Michael to come, it's sufficiently interesting that he came himself to present the announcement. But in the meantime, just a reminder, I'll make them very brief so they'll be easy to remember. Zopa is next week going to lead a class on the 3 principal aspects of the path. Saturday. So that's there. And then coming up in April, Jeff and Sally will be leading their series in Monday evenings on caring. It's the care and feeding of your practice. Okay.
Tell about it.
Yeah.
Here, step back.
I have to see where Michael is. I'm expecting him to wander in by now.
Sally's looking.
Okay.
Yes, this will be the second installment in our ongoing series on the care and feeding of your daily practice. And we'll meet once a week for 5 weeks in April. And this time we'll be looking at working with the unbounded view. In our Dharma practice, we're inundated constantly with messages about connecting to all sentient beings and seeing things in a bigger picture, and it can be easy. We recite them so often that they can go by without us ever really knowing what they mean, and at some point each of us finds we have to challenge ourselves to build a relationship to that larger view. So over these weeks we'll look at that together, and we'll do some study and contemplation, and try to carry these things out into the world and support one another in just experimenting with that process.
So, yeah. I think Michael was here for most of the session, but he may be on. Now, where is he going? He's actually here a little bit early because he has to go to the airport to pick up Lama Tara, so he's sort of threading this in between. So he might be on the phone with something in relation. So the balls juggle around. So Zopa, in the meantime, do you want to say a little bit about the 3 principal aspects of the path?
Okay. Okay. Well, there's a pretty good description on the site about the class next Saturday from 9 to 3. This is a very short text by Lama Tsongkhapa, who is a major theoretician and practitioner in the Gelug tradition. So it will be very familiar in some ways, and also somewhat a new perspective, a new prism to look through. So the 3 principal aspects are, number 1, what's often called renunciation, which is kind of a scary term, like I renounce. And another good translation of it is determination to be free. The determination to be free of what? So we're just renouncing our own suffering in our minds, the renunciation of suffering. And the text is, as I said, quite short. It's 2.5 pages, but it's very pithy. It functions a lot like mind training text, like just cut to the chase. And the second of the 3 principal aspects is the familiar bodhicitta, with that vast view that Sally just talked about every single being and time and space opened up completely. And also on a relative level, just the kindness and the 6 perfections that are tucked in there of how to practice on a conventional everyday level. And then the third aspect is the scary word emptiness, or the confusing word emptiness, or as the Gelugpas often approach it, through dependent arising. So we'll be looking at that in a contemplation or two on dependent arising, which is very close to what Lama Michael constantly talks about, the deep interconnectedness. But it's a little different prism of a way to look at that as kind of a major step on the way to actually understanding and experiencing the emptiness of the relative, which is then the nature of the ultimate. Okay, so anyway, that's what we'll do. I have a little concern about it, because it looks like we're still wondering about Michael in the back of the room, which is, I heard about this really important march since I got out at 30-day retreat. It's on that Saturday, right? Do you know the times? I'd really like to support that, and so I'll think about that. But if you decide to go to that, feel free to come to whatever parts you can. And maybe we'll even think of adjusting times. If you're interested in going to both, email me so I get a sense of how many people that would affect, because it is a very important march. So this is the one against gun violence that the young people in the schools have asked us to be out there for them. Okay.
Now I'm reminded of a story about Pete Seeger, who is introducing Mississippi John Hurt at a concert. And he'd seen Mississippi John Hurt just sitting off stage, and he started to introduce him, and he looked over, he wasn't there. And so he said some more things about Mississippi John Hurt, and some more things. Then finally he noticed he was sitting up in the balcony. He said, "John, come down here." He said, "What are you doing up there?" He said, "Well, you're saying such nice things. I just don't want you to stop."
Yeah. Let's just say a lot of nice things about Lama Michael.
So, yeah. I think I see him there.
Oh, yeah.
There he is.
We see him.
There he is. He is. Yeah.
He's a really good teacher. And here's Lama Michael.
This is a very special announcement, so we're very glad that he took the time. We're very glad that you took the time to come and share this news with us. Do you want to sit down or stand up?
Honor the Dharma first.
Yeah.
Levitate.
Good morning. It's still morning, I think. So I have a carefully prepared paper to read carefully from, so that minimum errors are introduced. But just as a kind of introduction to it, I wanted to say a couple of things. Just 2 or 3 minutes regarding the history of our center, KCC. Which goes back into the 70s. For a long time, in the 90s, many of us made periodic pilgrimage, you might say, to India in order to meet with the renowned Bokar Rinpoche. Who we all appreciated very much and did our best to follow his instructions for practice and enjoyed his compassionate forgiveness when we did not do so well. And as each year went by, more and more people went to India, and an entire community formed in India that kind of disappeared after one of the annual events. And then next year, everyone would be there again, speaking different languages and enjoying each other's company and kind of basking in the warmth of Bokar Rinpoche. And along with Bokar Rinpoche, came another person whose name was Khenpo Lodro Dunya. And it was clear from the beginning that Khenpo Lodro Dunya was, hard to pick a word that describes it, committed to Bokar Rinpoche and studying with him. And for a long time, for many years, we went and we saw Bokar Rinpoche, and Khenpo Lodro Dunya was kind of sidekick, you know, somebody else who was there, who we also appreciated, and he gave teachings periodically, but Bokar Rinpoche was kind of the star. And then, after some years, Bokar Rinpoche suddenly passed away with only, literally, like no warning, less than 1 day. To the people who were with him when he died, less than a few minutes, an hour, came very fast. And at that time, Khenpo Lodro Dunya then, according to the culture, he became the heir Bokar Rinpoche's heir. Spiritual heir, we say. And for a long time, for years, Khenpo Rinpoche would not teach. Everything kind of settled for a while. And then he began teaching again. And it didn't take very long before we realized that he actually very quickly came into his own right, came into his own place, that he was also an extraordinary teacher. And just a few months back, 9 months is what I'm told, but I can't count, so he visited here, gave teachings, along with Lama Eric, who many of us have known before he barely heard the name Dharma. And so after this time, and after Khenpo Rinpoche coming 9 months ago, we were planning for the end of the 3-year retreat, which has a kind of specific ending. It's not like you plan a party and you can change the date around. It's like it has to happen in a kind of narrow space. And so planning isn't easy. And we started looking for someone who might come and help us someone who was special, of course, who might come and help us formally end the retreat and bring the retreatants out. But Khenpo Rinpoche had just been here, so it was our assumption he would not come again. Too soon. Not really enough going on here to warrant another visit. And yet, because of our relationship with him, we felt like you needed to make a pro forma invitation. Just the format of it required an invitation, but no assumption that he would actually take it. And sure enough, he said, I can't come. He had retreats planned with Khenpo Rinpoche, Bokar Rinpoche's incarnation, who was a young boy at this point. Actually, he's not so young anymore, but still. And then after less than a week, he wrote back and said, I have considered carefully the importance of coming and the potential benefits. And so I'm coming. Intonation mine. With Lama Eric's great assistance. Things were lined up, though we still do not have a date. Though we have asked for a date, and we have been promised a date about a week ago. So we're still hoping. Even Lama Eric, who usually is kind of cool about these things, is saying, I do not understand why we don't have a date. So things will happen. So this is about Khenpo Rinpoche's coming visit. So now I'm going to read the impeccable. Which you heard before, is just impeccable. As many of you know, Venerable Khenpo Rinpoche visited Portland and SCOL just a few months ago, 9 months. Earlier this month, we invited him to come again to officiate the ceremonies ending the 3-year retreat. Since this is the first 3-year retreat at Serchu Usal Ling, that line, by the way, is Khenpo Rinpoche's words. Some of these things in here are his quotes, but not all of them. So since this is the first 3-year retreat, that's scary. At Serchu Usal Ling, there will be many people at the opening and many more among KCC Sangha who have not encountered a 3-year retreat before. Yet many have witnessed an enormous investment of time, energy, resources bestowed on a relatively small number of people. At this point, it's 7. Khenpo Rinpoche's presence will speak volumes of the value he places on this endeavor. His words will increase the group's understanding of the purpose of such long retreats and benefits not only to the individual participants, but to their families and the community beyond. Over time, by seeing the long retreat, some individuals may be moved to consider and actually prepare for their own entry into a 3-year retreat or any long retreat. Others may wish to give their support to future retreats. At least those attending the opening may have a uniquely positive experience that can positively affect their entire life. Generally in the West, 3-year retreat openings are attended by a large number of people. It is a happy occasion, and there is an atmosphere of open-mindedness. People will come with curiosity and interest. If teachings are given, and they will be given, both some at the retreat land, but mostly in Portland. As for the retreatants, to meet with Rinpoche will be so memorable. Perhaps he will meet them the day before the opening. It may sound like hyperbole, saying that people will be this inspired, but many of us have witnessed this kind of connection. In so many ways we cannot now count. Rinpoche's attendance will benefit the opening of the retreat, the community of KCC, and the future of the urban center and Serchu Usal Ling, our retreat center. Now, a couple of things. One is that we started thinking about this, as I said before, a while back, and we're now, if we were to get a date today that was 3 months from now, which is kind of what we expect, 3 months is not very long to plan for his return. In fact, it's sort of a seed for panic. But we don't do that. We're good Buddhists. So other people panic. We are cool. So we panic privately. So the thing here is that there's going to be a lot of work to put this together. And all of us who have engaged in putting something like this together if it's done carefully and with a sense of kindness and a sense of community preparing for something important, it can be not only uplifting, but it can produce the same results as our meditation practice. And the two together can bring about extraordinary results. So we have witnessed this in the past, and while it may sound like hyperbole to say things like witnessing a long retreat coming to an end could cause someone to want to do a long retreat, here we have the situation where many of us have actually personally experienced exactly that sort of thing. So we're going to need help to put this together. And very quickly, a group of people have, after the requisite panic, we want to say, have come together and are coming together. And so I would like to ask that as many of you as can, that you put yourself forward and make an effort to make this event something very special. And in the process, I can promise that you will yourself have the experience of something special by virtue of engaging in it. And so I'm not the one at this point to name who you should see or what, but somebody here is going to say something, isn't it? As soon as I'm gone, you're going to talk about it, right? Rosemarie, take it.
So this really is an exciting opportunity. At the same time, it's exciting too because we have a lot of people that are relatively new to the center. So it's also an opportunity for folks to become involved quickly in something exciting here at the center. So there will basically be kind of two pockets of help that are needed. One is with respect to the teachings in Portland, and the other is the opening ceremony at SCOL. And there may be other things too, but those are the two that strike me. And there's all kinds of help needed. Everything from sort of staffing tables to setting up tables and chairs to helping with transportation, helping to record the teachings. There's just a long list. And so it would be great if you could think about helping out. And Linda, I'm going to let Linda talk. Are we going to set something up? Or what are we going to do today?
So we do have sign-up sheets already, and Rosemarie and I will be in the back. I'm, huh? What'd you say? I'm Linda. Yeah, so we are excited about this, and we really want to keep the spirit of generosity and seeing how we can create some fun in whatever we do and bring some joy to everything that we do. So that's the spirit we're going into with this. So I just encourage you, just come take a look at the list. And if you can't decide now, contact us later, or if you think you might be interested, put your name down, and later you find out you can't do it, that's fine too. We just want to make this a community event. So please come and talk to us about it. And Willa also is our volunteer coordinator for here. So,
do people know Willa? Where is Willa?
Hey. Okay.
Email for those not here?
Yeah, will there be something posted?
Oh yeah, we'll post something, definitely. You can count on it.
We're not doing this alone.
So we'll be set up in the back, and come and see us.
Thanks, Rosemary. Thank you.
You're probably wondering how other people will hear about this if they weren't sitting here today. And we are preparing to send out emails, and we had been hoping to have a date that we could put into the already drafted language. Already, but the date is a mystery. So just to know, feel free to spread the word as you'd like, knowing that it's June. And as soon as we know the date, this email will get sent out both to the community list and to the broader lists. So that's just a little side note. Any questions anybody has? Any excitement in the room?
So I have a late appointment already to leave for the retreat. And so I need to leave. Maybe we could dedicate the merit of our little get-together this morning and the aspiration to work well together and produce something that we all feel really good about, which is actually going to be easy.
By this virtue may I quickly realize Mahamudra and establish all beings without exception in this state.
Thank you. Yeah.
So just so there's no confusion, this is a tea break, and we will still have discussion up till 11 for those who can stay. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, he gets to go tell.